So let's talk about this thing that we're going to introduce. We've been working on it for how long, Tim?
Oh, it's been in some way years since the first version of this category list was sort of put up on the site. And then it really sat for a long time. Quite a few people adopted it, even companies adopted it. I wasn't really aware of how widespread it has sort of been out there, but yeah, when this idea came back for you and I to sort of revisit it all again, I decided to really look over the list again and kind of, now that I've spent a couple of years sort of doing a lot more intense library work and things as well, I had some new ideas, and then you had some ideas, and then together we had some ideas, and this is so yeah. We'll start with the list itself, maybe, huh?
Yeah, I mean, this thing, it was going to be like a 2-day sort of job. It's turned into a 2-month endeavor.
Yeah. So before
and we're
we
still
go back,
friends at the end of it. So
I know
that's something.
exactly.
We'll see if we make it through the Zoom.
Exactly. We'll see what tomorrow brings.
Yeah.
So I'm going to call up the list. Well, again, so for people who aren't familiar with it, what we're talking about is this list of a category system for sound effects that involves a category, a subcategory, and what we're now calling CAT ID for category ID. It's sort of a short abbreviated form. And so again, I made this first list, which used the phrase long ID instead of CAT ID. We changed it for a couple of reasons, but years ago. And so this is basically a new and updated list. It's built on the old list, but it has quite a few expansions, and the CAT ID sort of structure and some of the naming is different. It's, I think, much improved. We spent a lot of time showing it to various people, librarians and other people who do a lot of this kind of work. And we did a lot of back and forth to try and finalize this list. So the list itself has about 550 total entries. And we'll talk about a few things. But basically, this is the jumping off point, is that this idea of having some system to catalog your library, to have a system that you can organize basically based on category, subcategory. And this is also useful in the naming of file names, which we'll show off as well. So this list is kind of going to be made available freely to anybody who wants to use it. It's something that's going to be sort of public domain. I'm not planning to update it again, but as we'll talk about later, it's possible for people to, update it slightly if they want to. Although, I think it's more useful if people didn't update it as much, because again, the whole idea here is we're trying to get people to sort of adopt this sort of universal idea of a category list, so that when you trade sounds or sell sounds, we've kind of agreed upon these categories. No list will ever be perfect. There's lists out there that have 2,000 plus entries, which I thought was too many. There's some lists much less. This is, to me, the best sort of hybrid I've come up with and sort of seen for a while. And so this is the list. And so it breaks everything down again into categories and subcategories. So you have, category ambience, and a lot of subcategories: caves, deserts, drones, ethereal, and an abbreviation for each of those things. And the idea is that this abbreviation would usually go at the beginning of your file name as a way to sort everything. And as we'll see, a way to use this to assign the categories. But so that's where we started, was with this list. And at one point, the old list, I remember you had put kind of into SoundMiner. It was available under an assigned category workflow. And that was kind of the implementation of it there, I think.
But it was very hard to edit. It was sort of embedded in there. There was like little hacks where you could like point it at a certain file. So part of what we've done together is kind of like thought about ways of making this sort of more accessible to people to be able to edit if they needed to, or add. I'm on the same page as you. It's like, I think there's enough categories there. It's possibly more subcategories that could be added if there was like a specific type of musical term or something like that needed to be added in.
Yeah, or like one area for sure would be, if we look under design for design sounds, these are sort of some pretty basic ones that we kind of came up with after talking to a lot of people, but everybody might have their own terminology for their own design sounds. So that's certainly a category that people might want to expand and add an entry here or something like that. The other thing that's possible people might want to do, again, it sort of defeats the purpose slightly, but I understand how people want to work, is they might really have a differing opinion on what the short category ID for something might be. And, they may have their own system already that they really want to tweak to this. Well, what you've come up with is pretty clever, which we'll show off, is a very easy way for people to adapt this list to their own library. So it's not locked off. Mm-hmm. And I remember, in the old one, you kind of had to import the list and all these things. It wasn't really just meant for that in the old way of working. So that's this. I have an explanations column, which again, I didn't explain everything, but things I thought needed a little explanation, I've just put in there. And again, we'll make this Excel document available to people too. The colors don't really mean anything. They're just a way to separate alternate the categories. So when you want to quickly scroll through it, I just find it visually easy to sort of see them kind of change back and forth. That's the only thing. So the colors don't really mean anything aside from that. And again, an explanation of a category where I thought it needed some explaining. And so you'll see different things like that. And so there's our starting off point. So maybe we should go over to SoundMiner and then see what this thing can do.
Yeah, let's see it in action.
So we should point out that basically with the build when it's released and you launch SoundMiner for the first time, it's going to create a couple of new files that people haven't seen before. And this first one is basically the list in a CSV format. And this is what SoundMiner, right, is using to sort of populate internally all of its components.
Exactly. It's sort of like the master list. So everywhere inside SoundMiner where this category list shows up, whether that's right-clicking, which is a new feature which Tim will demo, whether it's in the assign cats workflow or if it's inside the Radium sampler,
right,
under
or
the
little
preset
scripts
thing.
we're going to talk about in a little bit too. So basically this list, and now, so this list gets created on the first launch if it's not there. On subsequent launches, if this list is here, it's loaded from here, right? So this is basically where you would also modify the list. So if you made a modification to this, quit SoundMiner and relaunched it, your modifications would be loaded back in basically on the next launch. So we'll talk about editing this in a little bit. But because I've just launched it again, the first time it makes that list, it's basically going to be making this list exactly as this is sort of released to everybody. So if you put them side by side, you'd see that they're basically right now, they're the exact same list. So so here I have a database. It's just showing cat ID, category, subcategory. This is a new field called category full, which is basically a combined category, subcategory, which will show effects name, file name, and I have designer show and library. We'll look at this stuff a little bit later more, but so I'm going to just drag some sounds in. This one might be these are just some sounds that I sort of came up with and just kind of named in a way that seemed pretty typical for the way a lot of people would work. So they're just some ambiances and things like that. So you can see the file name is pretty basic right now. And so the first thing maybe we should show off like the using the cat ID sort of filling.
Definitely, yeah, because I mean,
or maybe category full first, because that sort of makes more sense to start with that.
Well, I like the way you work,
right?
Which is because if you are inside Pro Tools and maybe you're just exporting some region or files that are going to go into the library, you sometimes just want to name the file with a minimum amount of sort of tags that you can then sort of expand on. And one of those tags is this new cat ID field, which is just looked at from the beginning of the file name.
Yeah, so let's work backwards for a second, and then I'll just show real quick. So if I take, for example, this file here is a restaurant Walla. So if I'm going to come over, maybe I'll start here with category full real quick. Is that all right? And then I'll...
Sure, yeah.
So now this is new. So if I right-click, you'll see at the very top is category full assign. And if I come down to ambience and go to restaurants and click that, then immediately the category ID is pulled from that list, BG restaurant, ambience and restaurants is filled in, category full is filled in as well. So if I went down and just picked a couple more, so these two are basically going to be, I'm going to assign to ambience industrial. And these last ones here, I'm going to assign to nature, wind. So you see very quickly, these things are all filled in. And what I'll talk about how I name files in a second, but a lot of people, if they haven't done this, well, now we mentioned that like the goal is kind of to have this cat ID at the beginning of the file name. Well, one thing that you could do fairly easily is to use a workflow. And I built a really simple one, which is not here because I reset the thing. But if you field build basically file name with an underscore in front of it, like this, and then use the copy field and say prepend the cat ID to file name, what this will basically do is take the existing file name, right, and append a little underscore, and then it'll put the cat ID. So when I run this, it basically takes that cat ID and puts it at the beginning. So for people who, again, when we talk about my scheme, I named the file directly in Pro Tools this way, which we'll show off in a minute. But if you didn't, you could very easily prepend that into the file name if you wanted. And I have some files where I've done all the full naming before. But so in addition to right-clicking category full, what you could do is right-click on cat ID, and you could assign it here. And this is actually showing you in the list, full list of all the cat IDs, along with things. So I could assign these all to background traffic. And the second I do that, they all immediately fill in just like this. You could also use the workflow that's called assign categories. So if I just did it here, I've got the same list. Now mechanical ratchet, when I run, they're all filled into that. And if I then reran that other script, I could just, you'd have to remove this name
your
first
files,
and things. But
for
yeah,
sure.
But again, for people who haven't done that, they could do this. So this is now, again, these are the main ways that you can assign categories. And again, if you change your mind later, you can come back here and you can go through here and, change them all really easily. So we should maybe, you want to talk about the foreign thing first, or do you want to show off the other way?
I think let's remove these items from this database and rescan those files back in, because those files have been renamed with the cat ID at the beginning.
That's right.
So this would be, so you've got no metadata right now inside the database at all.
Correct. But we do have this cat ID here.
We do have this cat ID.
Yeah. So one of the other things is a Lua script. A pair of scripts, actually. We'll just show off the first one with this file name. But if you right-click on the files, again, there's no metadata here. Under the process metadata script, you'll see one that says auto-expand the cat ID. And what this will do is look to that same list where it finds a match. So it reads up to the first underscore, basically. If it finds a match, it's going to then go ahead and basically also just fill in those things, basically using the same list and, same rules, just like that. So
for a lot of people, I think, once you learn that cat ID, maybe you just print it out in front of you. It's a lot faster than having to navigate through menus and sub-menus, because as I'm naming this file, what is it? Oh, it's wind. Okay, wind underscore.
Yeah,
and then you just
I think eventually you just start to memorize them as well. Like me, I know all of the categories in my library and things, and you just know them as you name the files. What I did actually when I was first learning it was I made a set of wallpapers of all the categories and the cat ID in my desktop, and I would just quickly hide everything to look at the desktop, and I had them spread across all my monitors, and I could quickly.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I could very easily see, like in a quick reference. I was thinking I should make some wallpapers like that had that, but then it's like trying to figure out how big they should be. So and again, it's if I wanted to, I could simply come in here and I could just name this something else right here. So if I change this to restaurant public place and now I run those again, you'll basically see that it's going to fill in now ambience public place. So it's again, you can name this however you want, and you can even change this within SoundMiner after the fact if you want to recategorize something. It's a whole lot easier than doing it via this way and then having to rebuild the file name. Just rename the file name, put the right category at the beginning, and then just expand it again. It will just replace whatever's here. And so maybe
excellent. So let's talk about the left panel, the left side panel there. So if you open that up,
this up, and we see category full. And and again, so it's basically now showing us with a sort of a drop-down menu.
Yeah, it's basically showing all the categories and all the subcategories, and it's sort of like how the path name works inside the left filter panel, in that you don't have to drill down to the actual subcategory. So you could click on restaurants right now, or industrial, and it will show you just those files which have those files, but you could also just click on ambience, and it will bring back all of those that have the category of ambience.
Right.
So it's a great way if people don't know your library to just browse through categories and subcategories to get to the things that they need.
Yeah, and this again, category full is a field that I've had for a while in a verification, but now it's going to be in it's there. We should point out real quick too that if you have a database that doesn't have these fields, you don't have to create a new database and rescan everything. I'm not showing that screen, but there's a librarian menu at the top. And if you click on it, right at the very top, it says add category full fields. And that will basically add cat ID.
The cat ID,
and category full into any database that you're on. So that's nice. You don't have to sort of build a whole new database. You can just add those fields. And it was very fast. It only took a split second to add those in.
And any new databases will obviously have those fields. It's just so people don't have to rescan. I know people have spent a lot of time scanning all their material in, so it's a nice quick way to get those fields in.
Yeah. Maybe we should talk about the second sort of more powerful script kind of in relation to file naming as well real quick, or should we look at the foreign stuff?
That's good.
Let's do that. So let me remove everything here because I've also prepared a bunch of files with a very specific file naming structure, and we're going to release a little document about that too. But So we're going to release basically this document, which is a document that explains in much more detail what I'm going to sort of show off here. But the idea is that I've always had this way of working a little bit different than the way I think a lot of people work, which is a lot of people will pull in a file name with just something very rudimentary. They'll build all these fields in SoundMiner, and then they'll do a field build to sort of create their final file name after the fact, which is fine and it works. But what I found, kind of like what you're saying, right when I'm within Pro Tools, the second I create the file is usually for me the best time to name the file. It's fresh in my mind. I know what category I want to put it in. So I will just say that my file name is pretty rigid, and it has basically 4 or 5 parts, and they're separated by underscores. And this is the only place these underscores are allowed, is to separate these blocks into different chunks. So the first underscore is after the category ID. The next chunk of data is what I call the effects name, and it's going to get filled in here when I show you this script. The next thing is called a short ID or a designer, and basically these are initials. And these initials also will match something, which we'll show off in a second, and it was called a facility lookup table. And then the name, abbreviation for potentially a show as well. And you could have another underscore at the end, and after that is kind of free. Anything you want to put there after the last underscore is more or less is ignored by these things. But these first things are pretty important to get right. But I could still run here the category ID script, and it would take that and fill in that. But it doesn't do anything over here for designer and show, and it doesn't do anything under effects name. So there's a second script, which I'll run, which is called basically auto expand file name, which does a little bit more. It does the same thing as auto expand cat ID, but it also tries to match the designer and the show. And it takes that second chunk of data between the first and the second underscores, and it fills in effects name, and it basically capitalizes it in one fell swoop. So by naming the file name strictly on its creation, basically with one click, I filled in all of these fields. You can see that it's matched these designers, and I'll show you that in a second. It's matched these shows, so it knows that TLP is the Little Prince. It knows that Dory is Finding Dory. It knows that none is, they weren't created for a particular show, and it fills them in. So the only thing it really doesn't fill in is description, which is, of course, something that it has no way of knowing what you're going to describe it. So I would have to switch over here to my description and, fill those in, which I would have to do anyway.
And we should also say that this script in particular has been in use for quite a number of years at the facility you work out of.
Yes,
and they were gracious enough to allow us to sort of release it to the public to a certain degree.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this has been a way we've worked for a long time, and we realized that it was, it doesn't hurt us in any way to sort of let other people sort of work this way. And again, the document that I showed you will basically explain, again, the strict sort of rules of the file name. There are some things you could have spaces in here, and there's a few things, but the document will explain it in much more detail than we want to go into here. But I should just say that if I can find where I put this document that is needed, there's a second document needed in addition to that, is called the facility lookups. And this is created, again, on the first launch. If it's not there already, it's kept in the scripts folder. And if we open this is Code Runner, but you can open it in any text editor that can do some formatting. And really all you need to think about are these two areas here. This is called the lookup designer lookup and the show lookup. And so you can see what I've done is I've just populated this with TN equals Tim Nielsen. So that script, whenever it finds TN in that position, will automatically fill in the designer as Tim Nielsen, Mikkel Nielsen Heikki Kosi. The show, same thing, none equals none, Dory equals this. So you basically, if you want to add another show, you just put here DM3 equals, Despicable Me 3, and because this is a script, the formatting is important, so you kind of have to pay attention. If you put an extra quote in or something like that, you'll throw everything off and you'll get errors, and then you just realize that there's something in the formatting. So you be careful when you put these in. But as you slowly populate these things with new projects, and sometimes people put in here the name of a commercial library could be in here too. So maybe Boom Library, you have something and you put that in to match that fills out the full name or whatever. So that's
the nice thing about this is once you've edited it, you don't have to relaunch. It's because this facility lookups is looked up every single time. Yeah, at the moment.
Okay.
So you could be, yeah. So you could do it right now. You could put in a DM3. Yeah, you could put that in right now and then run the script, and it would pick it up.
Let's try it. So if I just name this one, change it to, assuming I did it all right, this one. And if I switch to
Yeah, it did. I saw it there.
There it was. Yeah. So there you go. So like, you put in all the initials of the common people you work with, or your own, or again, your own projects. If you have a lot of projects and you want to quickly do that. I mean, again, my argument would always be too, that the file name itself should contain these pieces of information. You want to know what category it's in. And again, we do this so that Pro Tools will sort all of these for us. That what you don't want is like large pond, small pond, medium pond. And then now you try to sort them. Good luck finding anything. You want some information about what the file is, because without that, again, you have to think, how's this useful to me if I don't have SoundMiner right in front of me? And again, who created it in the project? So I find these 4 pieces, pretty crucial to have in the file name anyway, once I've transferred it into Pro Tools and I keep working with it.
And definitely, if you're a librarian as well, and you're getting a lot of files from all types of different people, it's great to be able to see who gave you that file instead of having to like look into the folder, and it's all embedded inside the sound file, and you can easily expand upon it. You don't have to worry about typos either. Sometimes people might misspell your last name, when they're entering in the data.
The other thing as a librarian that I really like too is like, let's say that I just renamed this incorrectly, right? So this category ID now isn't going to match anything internally. So when I run that script now, basically I'm going to get an error. It was on the other screen, which to me is also a great reminder that like, oh, there's something wrong with this file name. This is not in correct sort of format. And then I go, oh, and this happens all the time. If I'm doing it in Pro Tools, I might misspell something. And as a final check, it's a great thing. And then the last step I always do before I sort of move the files into their final location is I run that script one last time. And if it comes through clean, I know that this chunk at least is correct. Because what you want in your library is consistency, right? You don't want winds, wind, windy, all these different things. When you want to search for wind, you want to search for wind and find everything at one time. So that's Brilliant. That part of it. I'm trying to think, should we show about adding another column to the CSV for like auto-filling in like the library in that one case, like this real quick, and just show that? Or
yeah, sure, if you want to, if you feel up for it. I mean, or we can go straight into the foreign language stuff.
Yeah, we can go to the foreign stuff then. So one of I was just going to show one last thing, which is let's show the folders real quick, and then we'll do the foreign stuff. So I have basically, let's say I was starting out and I have my library here and it's totally empty, and I'm just starting off with these files, and I want to basically move them into their final home. So what I do, once all of my metadata is done, basically I'm going to use the mirror command, and I work in FLAC, so I would change this to FLAC. I want to interleave it. So, these settings you can set up how you want. But what I'm going to do is say build using category, then subcategory. And when I do this, and basically I click here, you basically see very quickly that it went ahead and made those files in their final location with all the metadata embedded, in a set of folders that matched the thing. Well, Justin had the idea, or somebody had the idea years ago, of this ability to sort of create a set of folders that were empty. Let's say, I don't know exactly the scenario you'd want this, but let me just clear these.
Let's say that you're going to be working on a game, you're going to be pushing games out or something, and you need to create assets. And those people that are doing the actual sound implementation don't have like a librarian program. They just need to be able to like browse through files, or they might be depositing sounds in folders, all types of different scenarios.
Yeah. So the category list is designed as a universal thing too, even to be usable by people who don't have SoundMiner. Obviously, the cool stuff here can't be done without SoundMiner, but the list itself was designed to be meant to be used for anybody. So I actually am going to release an empty set of folders. But what's really cool is if I just right click basically anywhere, there's another script that says build category folder structure. And again, if it'll ask me for a location, and when I hit OK, then, almost instantaneously, it's basically now made a folder and a subfolder empty. They're all just empty, but it's built you a folder list that matches completely your list. Mm-hmm. And so again, like the other thing is I'm going to release this folder too, because it's like maybe people to get started just want to move everything into this sort of structure, but they don't have time to sort of do this mirroring and naming one by one. Well, this is a set of, here you go. Now you have a set of folders that match this sort of universal list. So, and that will be useful to some people.
Yeah, and if you've got people that are like making sounds in Ableton or Reaper and all kinds of different things, they're able to just go, okay, I've made a sound, I'm going to put it in design, it's going to be...
Yeah, or if let's say people have some sort of list, but it's not this one, they want to adopt this, they could simply take what they had under computers and, put it into this folder and just, they could organize it on a Finder first, and then they could go back in and do all the renaming of the cat IDs if they wanted to and things. So it's just another way of helping you organize your sounds. I mean, I'm asked all the time, people are just like, I don't even know how to organize my library. Well, you organize it like this by category and subcategory, in my opinion. And then, and again, what I might do is that might be, and I'll show off, in the thing I'm doing this weekend, how I organize my library by show, by commercial libraries, by Foley libraries, and it's sort of a top-down approach. And then within each show is category, subcategory, things like that. So if I wasn't in front of SoundMiner, I needed to get at one of my sounds, I ought to be able to find it in the Finder still. That's the goal, organizing it. So so there's that. Let me just show real quick if I open up the
category
CSV
again.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to Finder and just add another category, because basically there's sort of another powerful feature in this, which we haven't talked about. But if I just open this list here to make an edit to it, and we sort of ignore all of those things for a second, but if I basically create a new column, and I'm going to name it with something which matches a field, which I'm going to just say library. And then I'm going to put in here Tim Nielsen effects. And then I'm going to just copy that. And then I'm just
fill down, yeah.
Fill down. What I'm actually doing, because the scripts and all the different things match based on cat ID, but they will actually fill in any field that also matches. So now what I'm basically saying is, if you match anything, also go ahead and fill in the library field, right? So if I close out of this and go back here, and if I just simply run, well, this will have to be a relaunched one real quick. Yeah, because I'll have to load that list one more time. And cancel out of that. So now if I run this script one more time, basically, again, it said wherever this matched cat ID matched, since it saw a column called library, it took whatever the contents of that were and filled it in. So, for my own library, I might want this because pretty much everything I'm going to be putting in, I want to be default assigned to that. So that's just another thing. You could, in theory, do it with other fields as well if you had a reason to. So that's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. So, okay. Foreign language stuff, huh?
Well, yeah. Well, it's foreign language to us, but yeah, local language for everyone else.
Right. Well, so maybe you should, because this was sort of your idea, and you sort of thought about this as a concept of like.
Yeah, well, because I hear from a lot of people, and a lot of people, obviously English is a second language, and they're like, I'm comfortable searching in English, but maybe my assistant isn't, or there's someone else in the facility that would love to be able to do it, and so they're constantly having to go, okay, I have to enter in my categories both in English or in Japanese or French or German or whatever it is that their native language is at. So we came up with the bright idea of, well, wouldn't it be nice if there's, equivalent translations for each one of these categories and subcategories? And I think Tim could probably show the CSV file. So we've got a few translations done, thanks to the generous actions of members of the community.
Yeah, let me bring up the Excel one that's a little more tidy so I can close that and get rid of this. So this is the CSV file loaded into Excel, but what you'll see is a bunch of additional categories. And that, here's a bunch that we're hoping to do. But so category French, subcategory French, Polish, and German are basically now sort of done. And and we've had, really talented, helpful people basically go through these and assign, figure out what's the best translation for some of these kind of obscure categories. So alarms, klaxons, and you come over and, here's Polish and here's French and here's German. So that when you open this CSV, you're going to see all of these things, and they'll keep growing over time to other languages as we get people to do them, as you get people to do them. So, and again, so these fields here, most people in America or in Canada with English as your language, you won't see these fields, we should point out, right? So these are localized fields based on sort of where your computer is, I believe, your localization of your computer, right? So
yeah, so it's based a bit on your language. So on Mac, it's your system settings, and Windows, it's your locale. So it will show up whenever you create a new database. You have a choice, and it will create these additional fields. So
right. So if your language said French here,
yeah.
So if I basically came down here and said put this into French, and I've already done this once, and I say use French as the primary language. Now, when I go to the librarian menu and say create category full, it would basically also add a category French, a subcategory French, and a category full French, because my languages and my localization here is set to French. Yeah. So depending on what language you do, if that language exists, if we have it, then then it will basically create that. So I'm going to take
much like Tim demoed with the library column, is basically just matching. So it's going to be doing a substitution. But the nice thing is, it's got all of these languages like instilled upon it. So what you could do is you could just auto expand your cat ID, and if you have those foreign language fields, all of those are going to get filled out as well. Which means that if you buy a library from somebody and they've adhered to this kind of like the structure of having the cat ID, and maybe they only inputted English, you can instantly expand it and get your native language.
So here I have a database that I've prepped. And again, what I did was I went through, put myself into sort of French language so that I could install these categories. And then I switched over to Polish so I could install these. And, you'd have to, if you were in America and you wanted to install these, you'd have to do that to basically create these categories. So which we're doing here just for demo. I wouldn't normally have probably a lot of reason to call it the French ones myself, but to show this off. So again, the idea here is that just by selecting a cat ID, let's say, we'll use background construction. The second I click it, it's going to fill in not only the English ones, but also here's the French version. And again, that makes the full category. And here's the Polish one, right? And so, however, in every way that we've shown for assigning the categories, I could come here to also or even cooler, if I spoke Polish. Oh, it's not going to.
Oh, it has to be the category full.
Oh, that's right.
You have to be on the, yeah.
Yep, sorry. If I was in Poland, I could come over here and I could say, okay, computer, I'm pretty sure I know what that is. And, and if I select it there, it's going to translate back over to here as well. So it goes both ways. So, if you were in France and you wanted to name them from the French thing, you could absolutely go to ceramic, whatever that is. Oh, that's crunch. See, there you go. And so the other way to do it, of course, would be if I basically just ran the cat ID script, auto expand cat ID, it'll take these proper ones, fill it in, and again, all the translations as well. So pretty cool. And again, any way that you assign any of these things, it's instantly translating in all the fields if they're there and if they find a match.
And of course, the left panel again. So if we want to open that up and have a look, so there's category full, which is what we've seen before, but
and also category full French, right?
Yep.
So and again, you can turn them down, and I could just switch this to the category Polish, turn those down.
So whatever you're comfortable in searching in.
Yeah. So again, we know that a lot of people, even in other countries, are using English, but for people whose English isn't that great or who just want to think in their native language, I know that people I've talked to in Germany are always, we're always complaining about having to think in English categories. And like, well, you don't have to anymore now that the list is translated into German. So. Yeah.
And I'll add that to geek out a little bit here. So a side effect of all of this is that it follows the collation or the sorting order of the native language. So some native languages, it's okay to intermingle accents. Some others, I think like Sweden, the A with the dots, sorry, I don't know what its name is, should appear after everything else, all the other A to Zs. So it handles all of the proper sorting for you as well.
Right. I know that was not an easy thing to figure out.
No.
And because, especially, languages with weird characters, like you said, and Polish has some, but I don't remember if it affected the sort order, but yeah. So I'm trying to think, what else? Was there anything else we missed? So, modifying the list. I mean, again, the only tricky thing we should probably mention is if you wanted to modify the foreign languages, if you simply double-clicked a CSV file that had all of these, what do you call it, UTF-8? Unicode or whatever?
Yeah, Unicode. UTF-8 is the Unicode encoding. So it's able to sort of represent all of the languages.
Right. And so by default, if you double-click that CSV in Excel, it'll open and look a little odd in the foreign language categories. You'd have to basically use and we can post this somewhere, but we'll post it in the Sound user group how to do it. But you would basically have to import the data into a new spreadsheet and then save it back as a CSV. But if you just wanted to modify the English language ones, you could pretty much easily just open that up and do that right away.
If you used Apple Numbers, which is like the Apple version of Excel, you don't have to worry about all that Unicode stuff. It just handles it automatically. It opens up any
Okay.
CSV as UTF, so it just shows up,
Got
which
it.
is a nice thing about that.
Yeah, I mean, just to show, like if I double click this one, this is how it opens by default, and I'll just make it full screen. And you can see that it's freaking out about how to display these characters. Strangely enough, if you modified something over here in English and saved it, this still doesn't like screw this up. It doesn't corrupt it in any way. It just blows it away. So again, in theory, let's say that there was some thing, and I'm going to just blow this column away because I don't need it anymore. But, if you wanted to insert a new row and say, air, whatever, vacuum, how do you spell vacuum? Like that, or one C?
Yeah.
One C. I don't even know. Whatever.
No, I think too, but it's
okay,
good.
Here we go. And then, you would basically create your own short ID. Well, if I then basically saved this relaunch SoundMiner, then this would appear everywhere, as a pop down and an option. It won't match the foreign categories, obviously. It'll just come up with a blank entry for those because they don't exist. And we should say the order of this is actually sorted in SoundMiner. So you could also, if you wanted to, add things at the very bottom. You don't have to put them, you don't necessarily put them in order.
And it's also sorted in the native language. So you can see like birds in English is oiseau in French. So it would just make sure that when you display the list in French in category full, it's still with the O's instead of like with the B's. Like those kind of small little touches are all there. And the other thing too is, so right now, Tim's language is set to English. So if he uses the workflow assign cats, his list is going to be in English. Right. But if his locale was something else, if it was French, the assign cats display will be in French.
Yeah, and I would just want to show also just one last time, like if I let me close this one. And I'm going to open up this one again. If it's going to open. It's not opening. My Excel is not behaving well today. Well, oh, there it is. So my, again, we'll make this Excel document available, and I would tend to, my workflow would probably be to make the changes here, just because it's got the colors and stuff, and then basically to take these columns and export this maybe as a new CSV, overwriting the other one. And one of the keys is that these columns here have to match the actual field name. So if this is all uppercase, it doesn't work because the field is actually,
case sensitive.
Yeah. And again, if you never thought you were going to do anything with the foreign language translations, you could just have basically these are the three columns that the CSV has to have for all of this to work: category, subcategory, and cat ID. So if you wanted to make this your master list, you could, or if you didn't, you could just go in. But what you probably want to do is, if you're using both the colored sort of Excel document and the CSV, you're going to want to keep them in sync so that and I would just put a quick plug in. One thing that's pretty important is back this file up if you've made a bunch of changes, and this file, especially this, because if something happens and you accidentally erased it, relaunch SoundMiner, it's going to make a brand new one, and you're not going to get it back. I mean, this whole folder you should be backing.
Yeah,
up,
you should be backing up that whole folder.
This file,
yeah.
But I keep a backup of this that I constantly update.
And the easy way, if people don't know how to get to this folder, because Apple kind of makes it kind of tough to get to, it's hidden a lot of times. You can also go to the preferences. And under the main page that comes up under preferences, it will show you the support folder. It has a little arrow that you can then click on, and it will show. So down on current support path down at the bottom, see that little down arrow? If you clicked on that, it will then reveal where the SoundMiner support folder is.
I never knew that.
Yeah, a little power.
Yeah, because a lot of times the library is hidden by default for a lot of users and stuff, especially at facilities and things. So yeah. I keep a little shortcut on my desktop directly to this folder because I'm poking around in here a fair amount. But yeah.
Well, brilliant, Tim. I think we've done a pretty good job.
I think the stuff you've coded in here is pretty astonishing, and I mean we've gotten some first feedback from the people who've seen it are pretty blown away, especially just at how easy it is now to come in here and just assign whatever you want, and again just have it propagate so it's instantly through everything. And it's a good first step in a system that I'm going to hopefully show off to organize libraries more and more. I mean, I know that it's a daunting task to a lot of people, and I think this way will make it so much easier. Just the fact that, again, that you don't have to know the list by heart. You can just come in here and go, okay, I want to actually assign this to this. And then, if you could, from there, you could do all kinds of stuff with the workflows of naming your files. And maybe you already have that figured out for your own library. But just to be able to quickly come in here and just, get at all these categories and stuff and have access to this list within the program is pretty ridiculously cool, man.
Mm-hmm.
So well done.
I love the fact that, your files have that little prefix that sort of tell you an awful lot about the file without looking at anything else. So you know instantly that it's wind and not a wind. It's not a clock winding up. It's
right.
Wind.
Right.
Yeah.
Things
like
again, we'll make this available somehow on the website. We'll post a link. And again, this goes into much more detail about my personal naming convention and why and sort of how it works. And this really explains everything. It also explains, how to modify the list. This document will be pretty useful to people to check out. And again, if people are interested in adopting that sort of as a workflow, this explains all of that and explains the presence of the two files and all the things. And, again, here breaks down the file name into the various parts, has a bunch of examples, of what's allowed, what isn't allowed. And, again, not that everybody has to adopt this way of working, but I know that people who are just starting out kind of don't have any system. And so we wanted to offer people a system because it's important to have, structure and, keep it consistent and these kind of things. The worst thing that happens is you just start throwing all kinds of files in your library with no naming convention at all. And then you never find them again, and then when they don't sort in Pro Tools, and then you get frustrated. So, it's a daunting task to organize a huge library, but I think these tools that, you've helped code into this thing will make it a whole lot easier for so many people. And
my big argument is it's great to have 600,000 files in your library, but if they never show up anywhere, what's the point of having them?
Yeah, that's the left panel that you created too, the filtered search, the linked. That's so cool too, being able to again find things. It's all about finding stuff. But again, if you haven't given it some proper metadata, if you don't have file names that are conducive to finding it, then again, the filtered search wouldn't do you much good if everything didn't have sort of this organization at the beginning. And that's so. If nothing else, I'm hoping people will look at this list and kind of go, okay, if nothing else, the use of the cat ID at the beginning of the file name. If that's the only thing that comes out of this, because we do crowdsource libraries. We buy libraries all the time, and every one of them comes in with it's like the Wild West out there as far as file names go, conventions go. And even if nothing else, if we could all adopt this, just put this at the beginning of your file name. Now all of our things will sort in that order. When we want to mirror them out to a folder, it's so easy now because we've got a file name that has a category and subcategory. That's my real wish for all of this, is that this part of it stick, if nothing else. Again, I don't expect everybody to adopt the whole workflow that fills in all of these things and everything. But again, I think it's pretty cool that it does all these things. It's like,
and just how nice would it be to be able to buy a library, right click. Yeah. Or if all it had was file name as a metadata, these programs are expensive. They're very specialized. And if all you're doing is creating material for a library, maybe you don't want to purchase it. But if you can just name it with the cat ID at the beginning, you just know that people that have these type of programs could expand a lot of information out of it.
Cat ID underscore. I think the underscore is crucial too, just because if you do put a space and things, then it becomes difficult to find and replace to put that underscore with 550 different categories because they have different lengths. It's not like you could say place an underscore after the fifth character because some of the cat IDs are longer than others. So, cat ID underscore at the beginning of the file names would make everybody's life so much easier for sharing and buying and selling sounds and things like that. And again, this list will be made available to everybody. It's not, it's like the most powerful for sure in SoundMiner, like no doubt, like the things that you've done here are amazing. But the list is, it's universal and it can be adopted by anybody, even without using any databasing program as a way to organize. And so, that's sort of, I think our goal is just to help people organize their libraries. We know how daunting it is. And so